Today's frame that we're running the level cap is the Radiator Brick himself, Qorvex. Now going into this run, I honestly wasn't sure what to expect. Qorvex is one of those frames you don't really see talked about very often when people discuss level cap. Most people think of level cap frames, they think of all the usual suspects. Qorvex rarely gets mentioned, but after taking him all the way to level cap solo, I think that's a big mistake. This frame absolutely surprised me. What's happening, gamers? It's Ran. Now, not only did we clear level cap first attempt, but this run was actually far more comfortable than I expected it to be. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Qorvex is one of the more underrated level cap frames in the game right now. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously he has some weaknesses that we'll talk about later, but the combination of his pillars with Fused Crucible augment, Crucible Blast and Arcane Universal Fallout just creates a gameplay loop that is surprisingly effective and incredibly comfortable once everything starts rolling. The funny thing is, Qorvex is actually quite a lot like Mesa. Your primary damage comes from your 4 in this build, and it does lock you into some more stationary playstyle compared to most other frames. The difference though is that Qorvex has something that Mesa would absolutely kill for running the level cap. A full grey bar in his 4, and trust me lads, that makes a huge difference. While Mesa's constantly managing survival through shield gating and positioning, or as we did in our run, subsuming on Quiver to go invisible, Qorvex just gets to stand there out in the middle of the chaos, blasting radiation death lasers while sitting totally invulnerable to damage. The other thing that impressed me was just how complete the build felt. We had grouping, armor strip, energy sustain, health sustain, crowd control, and scale and damage all wrapped up into the one package. Once I got into the flow of the build, it genuinely felt like one of the smoother level cap runs that I've done recently. Just before we jump into the builds and the run, I just want to say another huge thank you again for all the support in the channel recently. The level cap series has been growing way faster than I expected, and it's been great to see all the different build suggestions and frame recommendations coming through in the comments. A reminder as well, we also have the community Discord up and running, links down in the description below as always. We're going to be using the Discord to select the next 4 frames that go into the community vote for the next level cap run. So if you want to have a say in which frame gets to run out next, make sure to go and join up. We've also got Stan X Prime releasing soon, which I can't wait to get my hands on. And the new dual frame, Orion and Sirius, honestly looks like another insanely fun design from DE. Can't wait to play that. Anyway lads, on to the builds. For the build itself, we're running Ophanim Eyes over his 3 Disometric Guard. Now this might seem a little bit strange at first because Disometric Guard is actually a really decent defensive ability, but the main reason for the swap comes down to the most important survival tool available to him in the level cap runs, and that's the Operator Grey Bar. For those who don't know, jumping into your Operator can give your Warframe a temporary grey health bar, which effectively acts as another defensive layer during dangerous situations. Problem with Disometric Guard is it completely prevents this interaction. Ophanim Eyes actually does the same thing, however because it's a toggle ability, you can simply hold the cast to turn it off whenever you need to access the grey bar mechanic. That means we get the best of both worlds. You get permanent armor strip throughout the run when we need to do the damage, and access to Operator Grey Bar tech whenever we need survivability. At level cap, the flexibility is incredibly valuable and was one of the main reasons I opted for Ophanim Eyes over keeping his original ability. We're also running the Fused Crucible augment, which is honestly what makes this setup so enjoyable. Fused Crucible transforms Crucible Blast from a single cast ability into a channeled ability with rampant energy drain. While active, Qorvex can move around, albeit a little bit slower, and any active Chyrinka Pillars have their duration paused while becoming empowered. More importantly, the pillars start triggering chain reactions, which massively increases the amount of damage spreading through enemy groups. This is really where the build actually starts to come together. For the shards, I'm running 4 Tau Orange radiation shards to further boost the radiation focus damage on the build, and 1 Tau Yellow casting speed shard, because faster setups means faster kills. Arcane wise, as I said at the start, we're using Arcane Universal Fallout. This arcane just feels amazing on Qorvex throughout the run. Universal orbs provide constant stream of health and energy pickups, which makes sustain almost effortless once the build gets going. Between Universal Fallout, the pillar interactions, and Fused Crucible, I never really found myself struggling for resources at all during the run. Rolling guards on there also, as usual, because rolling guards basically mandatory insurance for level cap. This build comes from another amazing creator in the level cap space called Will Cola. His Qorvex video is absolutely class. It's like a full-on story at the beginning as well. You need to go check it out for more detail on how the build actually works and the numbers behind it. Also, the thumbnail itself is amazing. Need to go check it out even just for that. Link's going to be in the description below. For the weapons, I ended up using a setup that really surprised me. In the primary slot, we have Warframe and Karnon. Didn't actually use it that much because most of the heavy lifting for damage was being done by Crucible Blast. Secondary slot though is where things got really interesting. I ended up using SCYOTID from Araxia, and this thing actually impressed me. Raw damage output was pretty solid, but what really made it shine was the alt fire. Grouping effect synergizes incredibly well with Qorvex because you want to be grouping enemies together. This helps to spread the radiation effects, the more chain reactions that happen, and the more Crucible Blast starts to delete entire screens full of enemies. I also used it as my answer to one of Qorvex's biggest problems, and that's the Thrax. Qorvex can absolutely handle tons of normal enemies all the way through to level cap, but Thrax are noticeably tankier, don't melt nearly as quickly with his radiation focused setup. SCYOTID ended up being my dedicated Thrax overguard killer throughout the run, and I would really recommend bringing something similar. Just bring a dedicated overguard stripper if you prefer, but I found SCYOTID covered both jobs really well. I also had secondary fortifier on there as another layer of survivability. As you always know, I try to stack as many layers of survival as possible for these runs, and that helped a lot in periods of transition when I was rotating around the tile set, so I didn't get one shot as soon as I left Crucible Blast. Finally, we have the Praetos and Karnon, as always, adding more movement speed just to help rotations and getting around the tile sets. For the companion setup, I used Nautilus Prime. The reason for this really simply again is for cordon. One of the most important parts of Qorvex feeling powerful is grouping enemies together consistently. Nautilus does this automatically for you. The amount of value you get from having enemies pulled into your pillars and Crucible Blast chain reactions cannot be overstated. Between cordon and SCYOTID's alternate fire, I always had a way to group enemies together, which made maintaining damage output extremely easy. It's one of those companions that quietly carries a huge amount of the workload in the background without you having to do very much for it. In the last few runs, we tested out some different amps, and we will go back to doing some more tests in some further runs down the road. But for this one, we're back to old reliable 547. I really enjoy using this. The 5 at the beginning with that burst fire is really forgiving, and the 4, the glaive, is really useful if you go down to help you get back up with last gasp. Just before we get into the gameplay footage and how the run went, if you've made it this far, don't forget to sub the channel to keep up to date with what we're doing, and like the video so it shares it out. Let's take a quick look at Qorvex's abilities and what we're working with here. His passive isn't actually super useful, just gives all weapons he wields core exposure, which gives him +3 punch through. Not very useful given the fact that we're actually using his 4 as a damage rather than using weapons. I think this is probably the worst part of his kit, and it would be really nice to see DE change this up in the future. His first ability is called Chyrinka Pillar. Qorvex summons a pillar that slows enemies and pulses radiation damage with guaranteed radiation status effect. This ability is one of the foundations of the build here. On its own it's actually decent, but combined with the Fused Crucible augment, it becomes significantly stronger. The goal throughout the run is to establish these pillars in key locations and start pulling enemies into them to create as many chain reactions as possible. The more enemies stack together, the more value you'll get from the pillars, and the more damage starts spreading across the map. It's pretty cool to see these pillars set up at different exos and rotating around the room. You just see numbers everywhere blowing up all over the screen. Really cool. His second ability is called Containment Wall. Qorvex summons walls that slam together, damaging enemies and applying radiation status effects. It's a pretty solid ability as well, and the grouping effect is useful. The augment for this provides armor strip, which on another build setup I could see myself using. Mostly in this build, I just used it here and there for some grouping. His third ability, as I've said, would usually be Disometric Guard. Creates a protective field that grants status immunity and defensive utility. It's not bad by any means, but I can definitely see situations where players would want to keep it. The issue for me, as I've said earlier in the video, is it interferes with the operator grey bar. Because of that, I decided to change it out for Ophanim Eyes. Not only does Ophanim Eyes provide armor strip, but it scales brilliantly into level cap, and also because it's a toggle ability, you can deactivate it whenever you see necessary and get the operator grey bar interaction. Lastly then, we have Crucible Blast. This is the star of the show in this build. This is where almost all of your damage is coming from. This ability is the reason that Qorvex really impressed me overall so much. Once you get your pillars down, group your enemies together and activate Fused Crucible, the entire screen basically becomes one giant radiation hazard. Enemies start exploding, chain reactions start kicking off all over the map, packs disappear almost instantly. It's really satisfying to watch, especially in these high density solo situations. Really fun. So how did the run actually go? Honestly, way better than I expected at the outset. Early run was completely free, mid run was still comfortable, and even towards the end at level cap, never really felt like this frame was ever struggling. Biggest surprise for me was just how tanky he is. As long as I was inside Crucible Blast, I had access to full grey bar, which made surviving significantly easier than many other frames have taken a cap. That's why I compared him to Mesa earlier. The playstyle is somewhat similar, but the survivability is just nowhere near. Qorvex feels dramatically safer. The synergy between Chyrinka Pillars, enemy grouping, Fused Crucible, and Universal Fallout makes the gameplay loop that just keeps feeding into itself. More enemies grouped up means more explosions means more universal orbs means more health and energy means more explosions. Once the machine starts running, it's incredibly difficult to stop. That isn't to say the run was completely without danger though. The biggest threat throughout the run was actually slash procs. More than once I came out of Crucible Blast, took a slash proc, and suddenly found myself in a situation that was very sketchy very quickly. This is where some of that survival tech started becoming more and more important. Rolling Guard was doing a lot of the work outside Crucible Blast throughout the run, cleansing status effects and giving me a brief window of safety. Operator grey bar interactions also incredibly useful. Whenever things started getting dangerous, I simply deactivated Ophanim Eyes, jumped in the operator, got that grey bar. It's one of those mechanics that doesn't sound particularly exciting on paper, but over multi-hour level cap runs, it can absolutely save you. Valence is probably the biggest danger out of the acolytes throughout the entire run, as usual with a caster or ability focused frame. The second he shuts off your abilities when you're in Crucible Blast, it just disappears, your grey bar disappears, and suddenly you're a lot more vulnerable than you were just a second ago. Fortunately, Qorvex is tanky enough that these situations were manageable, but there are definitely moments that I had to pay more attention. Additionally, a lot of times the acolytes spawned into the middle of packs being hit by the beam and was just instantly deleted and I didn't even see them. The only other enemy type that really slowed us down in the run was the Thrax units, as I said earlier. Everything else was just getting evaporated. Thrax took a little bit more effort to deal with, and that's why I was happy to have a dedicated overguard stripper in the SCYOTID. So where do I rank Qorvex after playing him all the way to solo level cap? Honestly, he's a lot better than I initially expected. Of course, he's not perfect, and he's not the fastest frame, he's not the strongest frame, and the fact that most of his damage comes from his 4 means some people will naturally dislike that playstyle as it's very constricted in its movement. But what I found that he is consistent, comfortable, reliable, and surprisingly effective. I genuinely think Qorvex is one of the more underrated frames in the game right now. The synergy he has between the Chyrinka Pillars, Crucible Blast, Universal Fallout creates a build far better than many people give it credit for. Another reason I think people don't play Qorvex is his fashion is wick. He really needs a deluxe skin or some other kind of fashion frame ASAP, and I think there's one coming in the next update which will be great. Anyway lads, another frame down. If you've made it this far and you've listened to me yap on, let me know what you think of Qorvex in the comments below, because of a feeling there's a lot more Qorvex enjoyers out there than the usage stats would suggest. Again, quick reminder, don't forget to join the Discord because we're going to be selecting the next 4 frames for the community vote over there. Link will be in the description as always. If you've enjoyed the video, help me out with a like, share, and a sub to fight back against the YouTube algorithm overlords. Enjoy the rest of the gameplay lads, and until next time, take it easy.
Your will was greater. This is good.